Okay, so finally this video is going to be looking at the benefits of using a client-server network. So let's imagine we've got a client-server network. So we've got a computer, and a computer. All of them connected. Let's imagine that we're like in a school, and we've got a server. Now let's imagine that we've got another computer also connected to the server, and this computer is where the IT managers use, so like the bosses of the network. So let's have a look at the different advantages. So number one, files are stored, and resources like printers and applications are stored centrally on the server. So you've got people's files like homework, you've got printers, you've got apps, all stored on the server centrally. So if you wanted to add some new apps, instead of having to install it on every computer, so imagine you've got 1,000 computers hooked up, all you have to do is install it onto the server, and then these computers can request the app when they need it. So it's all stored centrally. So that's the first advantage. Resources and files are stored centrally. The second advantage is in terms of security. So it can be managed centrally. You can create security and you can manage security centrally again. This dude here can monitor all access to the network or access to the server. You can see if there's any unauthorized, like somebody from outside of the network trying to get into it. So it's easy to manage security. Everything is logged. Every key you press is logged. Every file you put onto the system is logged. So it's easy to manage security. To create security, all the person needs to do, the IT manager, is to put rules in place on the server, and that will basically create rules for every computer hooked up to the client server network. The third is that, which is also linked to security, every user will need to have their own username and password. So think about how you got onto the school network. You need a username and password, which is stored on the server. That means that, let's imagine that this person's going onto a dodgy website like www.sheep.com, which sells sheep. Don't ask me why I use that as an example, but let's imagine that as a bad thing. It'll be logged by the IT manager. They can see who's doing what. Now, if you didn't have a username and password, anyone can go onto the computer, anyone could do it, and the IT manager wouldn't know who's been on that computer at that moment in time. So that helps. The next is centralized backup. So servers can back up your data. So imagine that you've done all your homework on your computer, and all of a sudden your computer died. Rest in peace. What happens is that all your work is also on the server. That means you can be given a new computer, and you can get all your work coming back to you because it's backed up onto the server. So centralized backup. The next is the ability to have an intranet. An intranet is basically like an internet, but just for the people hooked up together in the same building or hooked up to the same server. So you can have websites which no one else from outside of the network are able to see. So let's imagine that you work for McDonald's and you have a Employee of the Month competition, which you don't want the world to see, just the people who work in McDonald's. It will allow literally people who work for McDonald's to log in, and they'll be able to see if they've won Employee of the Month. Ding ding. That's an example of the intranet. It's like the internet, but it's protected from everyone in the world. It's only allowed for people who are hooked up to the client server network. The next, which I've already mentioned already, advantage is internet monitoring. So as I've already mentioned, this dude here, the IT manager, can actually log to see who's been on what website, what you've downloaded, what you're communicating, so what you're typing, it's all logged. Great for businesses, great for schools. Another advantage is that each computer doesn't have to be expensive. They can be really cheap computers, which means, because remember, the server shares the processing. The server sharing the processing means that you don't need to have fast, high processing computers because it shares the load. That means anyone who joins your network, you can just get them a cheap laptop. Sounds a bit familiar, doesn't it? And they should be able to connect to the network. So less money being spent. Less powerful computers, less money being spent. Server shares the workload. The final advantage is literally saving resources. By basically saving your resources onto the server, like your files, like printers, etc., it reduces the amount of work your computer needs to do, which means it frees it up. If your computer's not having to save things or run things by itself, it frees it up to do other tasks. So saving resources, because it reduces the burden on your client, makes it easier, so your client can just chill out, have a Coke, and take it easy.